So in the book, I'm reading case study after case study, as I mentioned. This patient reversed type 2 diabetes. This patient's heart improved. People who were told, you're never going to get better. Type 2 diabetes is irreversible. We're getting better. This was also the beginning of my awakening, not only about, the diet itself and about fat and what really makes you fat, but also why large organizations, institutions vilified him instead of lionizing him, instead of knocking on his door and saying, Dr. Atkins, what are you doing with these patients? We want to know how you're having all this success, and we want to duplicate it, and we want other doctors to duplicate it. That's not what was happening. The man was vilified. And even when he died, there were people lying and saying that he died of a heart attack because of eating fat, when in fact the man slipped on ice and hit his head, very tragically, in 2003. It was just crazy. This is True Voice Unfiltered, the podcast where raw truth meets real transformation. I'm your host, Daria Anne, ghostwriter, content strategist, and holistic health warrior. No, I'm not a doctor, nurse, nutritionist, or any kind of medical professional, and this show does not dispense medical advice. I'm just an informed patient sharing what I've learned on my own healing journey. I also interview accomplished authors, speakers, entrepreneurs, and functional medicine practitioners who are transforming lives. If you're ready to break free from the sick care system, reclaim your health, and transform your life, you're in the right place. Let's get unfiltered. Hi, everyone, and welcome to True Voice Unfiltered, episode 12. This is a solo episode where I want to focus on one particular aspect of my book, My Escape from the Sick Care System, a guide to overcoming PCOS, Hashimoto's, and autoimmune conditions with functional medicine. Today, I think just about everybody has heard of keto and ketosis, at least if you're online a lot and you listen to a lot of podcasts like I do. But back in 1999, podcasts were not a thing. The internet, of course, was around, but it certainly wasn't as advanced as it is today. So yes, I had a computer, I had a PC, I was able to search online for things, but outside of work, I was not much of a user. I know it seems crazy to say that now because my whole business, my whole life relies on the computer and a stable internet connection. But let's take a little trip back in time, shall we, to party like it's 1999. And believe me, I'm old enough to remember when 1999 seemed way, way out in the future. I was also a Prince fan in high school, along with a very good friend of mine. I won't say her name because I don't know if she would find that embarrassing or not, but I actually met her for dinner the other night, and it was really great to catch up. And we didn't talk about Prince. I meant to bring him up. Okay, anyway, I digress. So let's go back to the year 1999. I'm working in the community relations and marketing department of a large national bank based in Seattle. I was working out of South Florida. And I worked with great women. There were 4 of us that were housed in this particular office in Lake Worth, Florida, in South Florida. One was my boss. One was an executive assistant to my boss. And then another was a coworker who she worked in another department, but she did her job out of our office. And it was a lot of fun. It was great. When I look back on my work experience, working in that particular department for this particular bank was one of the highlights of my career. And later I made a really big mistake in internally transferring into the recruiting department, even though I worked with wonderful people there. That is actually going to be a topic for another episode and definitely a blog and a future book. I have a lot to say now that I'm free to say certain things. All right, so I'm digressing again. So let's go back to it's 1990. I describe all of this in chapter 4 of my book. I'm working for this department. I'm very happy because every day was different. I think that's one of the things I loved about that particular job was because every day when I went in, I was going to be working on different things. It was part corporate communications, so I was writing press releases. For example, if somebody got promoted in our area in South Florida, let's say they got promoted to branch manager or some other position or assistant branch manager, whatever it was, I would get their bio. I would write up the information. We would send it out to the South Florida Business Journal and other newspapers. And again, writing press releases back then was very different too because of the state of the internet back in those days. I mean, people were still reading newspapers, so things were a lot different. But anyway, I was one of those people that I've always, to me, early is on time. And especially when it came to work, I was always early. And my coworker, who I'm going to talk about today, she was also always early. We were the first two in the office, so the administrative assistant and me. So one day, and I believe this was probably in September of 1999. It was definitely the fall, and I'm pretty sure it was September. I get to the office, and then she comes through the door a couple of minutes later, and she's carrying a styrofoam container that was obviously from McDonald's with breakfast. And she had eggs and I believe sausage. Might have been bacon, but it was eggs and a protein. Scrambled eggs and a protein, and that was it. I didn't question her on it, but she loved to talk. And so she volunteered this information that she stopped at McDonald's and she got breakfast and she got eggs, and let's just say it was sausage. And that was it. But she did not get the biscuit and she did not get hash browns because she was doing Atkins. And I looked at her and I said, well, what is that? And she explained to me that it was a diet developed by a doctor, Dr. Robert Atkins, and that they recommended it for patients with heart conditions and who needed to take any type of cardiac test to prepare for these tests. Right off the bat, I thought that was a little bit strange because if Dr. Atkins' diet was so great and it was great for your heart, and they were recommending it before you took a heart test, then why not just eat that way all the time? Why wouldn't you want your heart to be in good condition as long as possible? Eat that way all the time. But I didn't say that to her because I didn't want to hurt her feelings. So I wouldn't say anything like, hey, if this is so good for your heart, why are you just doing it to prepare for an upcoming heart test? And I believe the test was maybe like a month out. And so her plan was to follow Dr. Atkins' diet for the next 4 weeks until she had her test so that she could have a good result. And then she proceeds to tell me that she can have steak, hamburger, full fat cheese. She can put heavy cream in her coffee or half and half. And for anyone who grew up in the 70s, 80s, and 90s, this was mind-blowing information because I had been fully indoctrinated into the calories in, calories out model. I've never in my life counted carbohydrates, ever. I don't even think I knew really what a carbohydrate was at that point. And I certainly wasn't putting full fat cream or even half and half in my coffee, except on special occasions when I would allow myself to have it because, fat made you fat, right? That's what Susan Powter was saying when she came around in the 90s. That's what the makers of Snackwell's cookies and all the various low-fat yogurts on the market, and what other foods can I think of? I mean, it is crazy. Even low-fat peanut butter. I mean, it was not thinking back, and a lot of these products are still on the market. I don't really pay attention to them now because I spend most of my time in the perimeter of the supermarket or, getting really good beef and meat at the local butcher or at Sprouts, the Sprouts near me, because they have awesome ribeyes and other meats and seafood. But regardless, it was absolutely mind-blowing. The more she spoke, the more my mind was blown. So I decided that night I was going to go to Barnes & Noble and pick up a copy of Dr. Atkins' New Diet Revolution. So the book I read was Dr. Atkins' New Diet Revolution, the 1999 version. Again, yeah, the internet was around. Maybe there was a website back then, but I was not as attuned to it at that time, and it certainly wasn't as advanced as it is now. And as far as I know, there were no support groups online as there are now with keto and the proliferation of all these fabulous podcasts. I mean, it's everywhere. When I discovered it years later, I was blown away, and I almost didn't even know what keto meant. I knew what ketosis was from reading Dr. Atkins' book, but no one was calling it Dr. Atkins. No one was calling it low carb. Now it was known as keto, and I'm going back now probably at least 10 years that I started to discover these different podcasts. But back then, I didn't have that support. So anyway, I went out to Barnes & Noble, and I highly recommend this too. If you're skeptical but curious about something, then do your own research and don't even listen to me. Go out and do your own research. I actually have a list of recommended podcasts in my book in the keto space, in the low carb space. Listen to them, listen to their expert guests. I want to be very clear, as I always say in my introduction, I am just a happy patient, and this is my experience. I even have a disclaimer in the front of the book that tells people that this was my experience. I'm not guaranteeing that you're going to have the same experience that I did. It's intended for informational and inspirational purposes only, but I also do include a free guide that you can download on how to find the right functional medicine practitioner for you, what questions to ask, what qualities to look for. I just want to help people by providing the resources they need to do their own research. And that's what I'm doing here. Anyway, that night I went to Barnes & Noble. I bought his book, Dr. Atkins' New Diet Revolution. And before I did anything, I read it from cover to cover. And what was amazing to me was that it was a single diet, but it was in 4 phases. The induction phase, ongoing weight loss phase, pre-maintenance phase, and then maintenance phase. The more I read the book, the more I realized why so many people, including my coworker, misused the diet or misrepresented it to people because they didn't get beyond induction. Most people just stop there. And they think that you could just, eat as much protein as you want. And honestly, to this day, I have a hard time eating the recommended amount of protein because it's so filling. And now I incorporate intermittent fasting. But when I read the book from cover to cover, I realized that it was much more involved and much more researched and much more successful than I had even realized. Dr. Atkins included case study after case study of patients he worked with who improved their health, whether they had a heart condition, type 2 diabetes. Okay, let's stop there for a second. Talk about mind-blowing. I had so many relatives with what I now know was type 2 diabetes, including my maternal grandmother, an aunt on my mother's side, a great aunt on my mother's side, and some other people who I can't think of right now. Seem to be mostly on my mother's side. I had always been told that this was genetic, that diabetes ran in our family. So imagine my surprise when I read Dr. Atkins' book and discovered that type 2, I'm being very specific here, type 2 diabetes is reversible with diet. Now, I never had type 2 diabetes. I don't have it to this day. But looking back, I was also dealing with PCOS. And I had mild symptoms like compared to many women who have PCOS. I had gained weight, but I wasn't what you would call clinically obese. I mean, maybe 20 to 30 pounds overweight. I had the cystic acne, but it wasn't like all over my face. I wasn't growing a beard or a mustache. So my symptoms were very, very subtle, which was also part of the problem. I bring that up to say that when I discovered Dr. Atkins, it was before I had been diagnosed with PCOS. So I think that one reason I did so well with low carb at the time was because I had undiagnosed PCOS, because my symptoms were mild and they did not all show up at the same time. That was the other problem. So anyway, I read the book and I decided I'm going to do this the right way. I'm not going to do it like so many people around me are doing it. So as I started on the diet, other people in my life were telling me, oh yeah, like people I know at work, my friends and I are all doing that. It seemed to have a resurgence in popularity. They were all doing it the wrong way. I had somebody say to me, oh yeah, it's great. You can eat all the whipped cream you want. And I just buy Cool Whip. Imagine Cool Whip. Now look at a label. Look at a Cool Whip label now. And look at the ingredients. Most of them you can't even pronounce. Okay, so I'm pointing all this out, not so much a criticism of people. Well, maybe it is a little bit of a criticism of people, because I really believe that you should do your homework and fully understand something, especially something as important as what you're putting into your body in the form of food and drink, before you start. And that was certainly my approach when I bought his book. I started the diet after I read the book. In the book, I'm reading case study after case study, as I mentioned. This patient reversed type 2 diabetes. This patient's heart improved. People who were told, you're never going to get better. Type 2 diabetes is irreversible. We're getting better. This was also the beginning of my awakening, not only about the diet itself and fat and what really makes you fat, but also why large organizations, institutions, vilified him instead of lionizing him, instead of knocking on his door and saying, Dr. Atkins, what are you doing with these patients? We want to know how you're having all this success, and we want to duplicate it, and we want other doctors to duplicate it. That's not what was happening. The man was vilified. And even when he died, there were people lying and saying that he died of a heart attack because of eating fat, when in fact the man slipped on ice and hit his head, very tragically, in 2003. So it was definitely another milestone along my path of awakening, I'll call it. So by the time we got to 2020, I was fully awake and not falling for the narrative. That's a story for another episode. I wondered at the time, though, I was pretty naive. Why isn't the AMA? Why aren't his colleagues Why aren't other organizations, even Weight Watchers, I know I pick on Weight Watchers a lot, but why aren't they knocking on his door and asking him what he's doing? Because he's having all this success. Well, follow the money, find the truth. And also he would be a sort of a threat to certain organizations, all the diet programs that are out there that are still stuck in this low fat, calories in, calories out model. And in fact, I have people in my life who still go to Weight Watchers and swear by it. And hey, it works for them. I'm not going to argue with their success. Did not work for me. I started at the age of 8. I also document that in my book. Lost 5 pounds, hit a plateau. I was always hungry. And that was basically the story of my life until I discovered Dr. Atkins from my coworker that fall. Now, I had people saying to me, well, don't you miss pasta? And let me just say, yeah, I am Italian and I'm proud of my heritage. I was never big on pasta. I was never even big on tomato sauce. When I was little, I always used to ask my mom to, whenever we were having pasta, I always used to ask her to make mine plain, and I would just eat it with some little bit of butter and some grated cheese. Now, I got to be honest, I still do love cheese ravioli. Haven't eaten it in a million years. But I'm not going to lie and say that I don't like it. But it wasn't a big deal for me to give up the pasta. I had a hard time with potatoes at first, too, though. But once I got into it, after I got past the initial 5 or so days where, yes, I didn't feel well, and now I know that that was carbohydrate withdrawal. And in the book, Dr. Atkins explained that you probably weren't going to feel well for the first few days, maybe even up to a week, while your body was, I mean, he didn't use these words exactly, but while your body was detoxing from carbohydrates and from sugar, it was that adjustment period. Now, of course, everyone calls it the keto flu. And I did have it back in the day, again, many, many years ago in 1999. And I'm glad that he brought it up in the book because it didn't alarm me. I mean, I didn't feel particularly well. I had a headache. I was tired, but I made myself power through and I pushed through. And by the time I got through it, I had all this energy. I felt great. I was like, man, I'm just going to eat like this all the time. Now, the weight did not, as I recall, didn't fall off right away. It took a couple of weeks. And then I kind of moved into like this steady weight loss where it wasn't too fast. It was kind of like steady over time. I want to say like 2 to 3 pounds a week, maybe. And of course, I was a lot younger then, so the weight came off faster. But I mean, I wasn't losing weight at all on low fat. But the biggest thing for me was I was never hungry. I was used to diets being drudgery and punishment and feeling hungry all the time. And I did not feel hungry. In fact, I was actually having problems eating enough because protein is so filling. The fat is very filling. And I was eating real butter. I do love heavy cream in my coffee to this day. Now, I only really drink 1 cup of coffee in the morning. I put a splash of heavy cream. I use my milk frother, and it tastes really good. And I also put MCT oil in there. And that's something I discovered maybe 6-7 years ago. So that's a more recent thing, along with collagen powder, which I didn't, well, I wish I had known about collagen powder back then. I probably would have started on it sooner. But anyway, enough said. I put that in my coffee as well these days. But it was so exciting for me to be able to do that. So exciting to eat full-fat cheese that actually tasted good. It was pretty amazing. And then I had people noticing, of course, as I started to lose weight. And there were a lot of naysayers who said, you're starving your body. Because they thought that maybe long-term ketosis wasn't good. Now, I did move into all 4 phases eventually of Dr. Atkins' new diet revolution. So I will admit that I was fine staying under 20 carbs, and I dragged out that induction phase pretty long. I mean, maybe a couple months. Then I moved into sort of like ongoing weight loss where I experimented a little bit, like with, okay, let me add like another 10 carbs today and see what happens. And his book at the time had parts of foods that were allowable, like good carbohydrates, let's say broccoli, eggplant, cauliflower, romaine lettuce. I'm trying to think. There's a whole list of them. And he would also have like how many carbs were in each thing. And so it was really easy to go from counting calories, which was very difficult, to counting carbs. And now I don't really it just comes naturally to me. I'm aware of them. I count them, but it's not as regimented as it was back then when I was first getting used to doing it. Now I pretty much know how many carbohydrates are in certain foods and in what amounts and things like that. But at the time I was pretty strict about really counting and making sure I knew what I was eating, what I was preparing and what I was eating. And I was thrilled because I could meet somebody for breakfast and have an omelet. Didn't care so much about the potatoes or the toast. And that's another thing I want to say too. Back then, there were no, keto products in the store, which is probably a good thing. So I was eating a whole food diet, doing low carb with whole food, which is what I recommend today too. I know there's a lot of gluten-free products on the market now, and I am gluten-free. Once in a while, I do. I'm going to be honest, because now that I've reached metabolic flexibility, which means I can go from being a fat burner to a sugar burner back to being a fat burner pretty easily. On the weekends or on certain days, if I know there's a party or a special occasion, I will flex out, meaning I'll allow myself to have a white potato or a sweet potato, or maybe a burger with a gluten-free bun. But I kind of pick and choose. So if I do the burger with a gluten-free bun, then maybe I don't eat French fries. And I really try to eat my meals at home mostly. But this is also real life. And yeah, we're going to go out, you're going to have occasions. You want to have a life. You want to be able to celebrate birthdays and anniversaries and Christmas and other holidays and graduations and weddings and things like that. So once you reach that metabolic flexibility, meaning you could go from being a fat burner to a sugar burner and back to being a fat burner pretty easily, you can let yourself have these days where you're going to eat something that you wouldn't normally eat. Now, because of the Hashimoto's that I have, I don't want to call it in remission. I'm just going to say it's under control. I'm not bothered by symptoms. They're all under control because of the way I eat and the thyroid replacement that I take and the supplements that I take and other things, working out at the gym, all the lifestyle changes, all the lifestyle routines that I maintain. I still stay gluten-free because gluten is a thyroid mimicker. And when you eat gluten, the antibodies that a Hashimoto's patient has inside of them, they see the gluten, they attack the gluten, and they attack your thyroid. So I avoid that. And I will say, even then, there's been occasions, on a rare occasion, where I have eaten gluten. I was at a family reunion recently, and my cousin had made, these are my favorite, the Italian wedding cookies, and they just look so good. And I knew they had gluten. I knew they had sugar. Now, as a side note, the sugar doesn't bother me as much if I go off, because I know I can burn that off. The gluten's a little trickier, but I had a couple cookies. I enjoyed them. I went back to my routine the very next day. And here's another thing too. When you do that, if you're going to choose to eat something like that, like in this case, I chose to eat those cookies. I vowed to myself, I'm going to eat these, I'm going to enjoy them, and then I'm going to forget about it. I'm not going to beat myself up, worrying that I ate them, or why did I do that? I'm not doing any of that. I'm just going to eat them and enjoy them in the moment, and it's going to be over, and then I'm getting right back to my routine the next day. And that's what I did. But back in 1999, I did not have Hashimoto's. So I didn't even know about being gluten-free. I just knew that I was eating low carb with real food. And like I said, that's ideally what I recommend to this day. So I lost 40 pounds, and I was able to keep it off for a few years. I struggled with maintenance on Atkins a little bit because of the lack of online support, the lack of in-person support groups. One thing I'll say about Weight Watchers, they have those weekly meetings. You get together with other people, you talk to other people who are all doing the same thing, and you get that support. I didn't have that back then. Now today, as I mentioned, there's a million podcasts, there are Facebook groups, there's other online groups. I mean, there's all kinds of support you can find for doing low carb. It didn't exist back then, and I still managed to do it and keep the weight off for several years. But at some point, the weight came back on. Not because of doing low carb, not that it didn't work anymore, but unknown to me, I had developed Hashimoto's. And so that's a longer story, but I'll just say that once I found the right person, the right functional medicine practitioner, Dr. Amy Horniman, then I got on her program, reached optimization, meaning we figured out the right thyroid replacement for me, to provide enough T3 to my cells for them to function properly, and symptoms went away. I was able to lose the weight. I just want to say, when your T3, which is the active form of the thyroid, when that is too low, when it's under 3.2, it almost doesn't matter how you feed yourself in terms of losing weight, because it's not going to work. I never thought for a second that it had to do with low carb. As a matter of fact, I'm not proud of this, but I kind of went off. I'm like, well, if I'm going to keep gaining weight, or if it's not going to come off, then I'm just going to eat whatever I want. And that was not a good plan either. But I got to a certain amount of weight gain, and I got to a point where I didn't actually gain any more weight, but I couldn't get it off. And it wasn't until I figured out that I had Hashimoto's with the help of a functional medicine practitioner, and then kind of just finding the right one. And I document all of it in my book because let's face it, we have good and bad in every profession. And if you're going to spend your hard-earned money on a functional medicine practitioner, which I highly recommend if you have an autoimmune condition, you want to do your homework and make sure you're investing that money with the right person. Someone who's not only knows what they're doing and has the education, but who's also going to care about you. Hence the guide in my book. And then also I have a guide to labs. I have recommended podcasts that you can listen to. I have a symptoms guide. There's a food and supplement diary where you can kind of track what you're doing every day. The part about supplements that I just want to also say here is that you really should work with someone, preferably a functional medicine practitioner, a good one, who's going to care about you, who not only understands the labs of the human body, has a thorough understanding of their area of expertise. For example, thyroid, since that was what I needed. You also want to make sure that this person actually cares about you, that they respond to your text messages or emails, that they're accessible. You can find them online. Maybe they're producing videos like this one that you can listen to, and they have a whole library of work. You just want to make sure that they are going to support you in every way, including finding the right dosage for you. So in my case, I started out on NP thyroid, which is natural desiccated thyroid. The FDA is coming after all of that now. That's a topic for another episode. Hopefully I can get a good functional medicine practitioner to come on the show to talk about that. But let's just set that aside for the moment. I started out on NP thyroid and liothyronine. So NP thyroid is a combination of T4 and T3. T4 is the inactive form of the thyroid. T3 is the active form. Our thyroid produces T4. Our bodies then have to convert T4 into T3. T3 gets into the cells and helps them function. I mean, your heart rate, your body temperature, your hair growth. It controls everything. Weight loss, digestion. T3 is super important, and if you don't have enough, you're going to have symptoms like hair falling out or hair thinning. I actually had hair thinning. It wasn't coming out in clumps, but one day I realized when I was brushing my hair that it was thinning. So again, with me, it just seemed like the pattern with whatever I had was that my symptoms were so subtle and they manifested over a period of time that it took me a while to do anything about it. I almost think it's better if you get a lot of symptoms at the same time, or symptoms that are so noticeable you can't miss them. If my hair was coming out in clumps in the shower, I probably would have done something sooner. But anyway, I just think that when you work with a functional medicine practitioner, you want to find the right one. And the reason I wrote this book, honestly, it's really for people who are still struggling, because I was there and I went from doctor to doctor to doctor on my insurance plan, wondering why I wasn't getting anywhere, even though I didn't know I had PCOS at the time. I knew I had irregular periods and no one had an answer for it, other than go on the pill, go on synthetic birth control, which I didn't want to do because I didn't like the idea of synthetic hormones. That is what I love about NP thyroid, is that it comes from an animal, bioidentical to what humans would produce, but maybe we're not producing anymore because of Hashimoto's. Now, liothyronine, I believe, is made in a lab. However, I've had no problem with it. But it brings me back again to my point where the right practitioner will take the time to tweak the dosage for you. Getting back to supplements, that should also be based on your lab results. You don't want to just take supplements in the dark and not knowing what your body really needs. So a good functional medicine practitioner will do that with you. As far as nutrition, I'm not condemning vegetarianism. I'm not doing it. Actually, years ago, before I even discovered Atkins, I was probably in my late 20s and I decided I was going to become a vegetarian, and I did that for 3 months and I couldn't stand it because it was boring. I had no energy. I didn't feel good. So I went back to eating meat and chicken and seafood. And I know for me that works the best. I flex in and out, yes, but I always eat animal protein, whether it's chicken, beef. I love ribeye steaks. I love hamburgers. I love ribs. I don't like barbecue sauce, but I make my ribs a different way. Animal protein, good vegetables, usually low carb vegetables. But on a weekend, like I said, I'll have a sweet potato, even a regular potato. And you're much better off, let's talk about that for a second. If you're going to have a sweet potato, eat a real sweet potato. Like, make it yourself or get a real sweet potato if you're at a restaurant versus potato fries, because most restaurants are buying them frozen and they got a ton of preservatives and added things in there that you don't want to eat. So if your choice is between sweet potato fries and a real sweet potato, get the real sweet potato. They're delicious, right? Really good. Anyway, that is the story of Dr. Atkins, low carb, and keto. And I just want to thank everyone out there who hosts podcasts in the keto subject matter area, because years later when I discovered it, and to this day, it still helps me, even though, gosh, now it's been so many years. We're going on 30 years. I initially discovered Dr. Atkins. So many more resources today. So take advantage of it. I have a list of podcasts in the back of the book. My book right now is still available in Kindle for 99 cents. I want to try to reach as many people as possible. Or you can get it in paperback for $14.97. It is on Amazon.com. And I think it's on Barnes & Noble online and other places. So whether you get it in Kindle or paperback, you're going to get the same great information. I personally love paperbacks because you can highlight things and make notes in the margin. I find that helpful. But either way, you're going to get some great information. I also, all the references that I mentioned in the book are here, including Dr. Amy Horniman, Dr. Atkins' New Diet Revolution, Dr. Claire Stagg, who is my biological dentist that I discovered I didn't discover Dr. Stagg specifically, but I discovered what biological dentistry is through Ben Azadi, who also wrote an editorial review for my book. And Ben is the New York Times best-selling author of Metabolic Freedom and the host of Metabolic Freedom. He's at benazadi.com. You can find all these people here on the references page. I have a free guide that you can download on how to find the right functional medicine practitioner for you. And, I just encourage you, if you're struggling and you're still doing the low-fat thing, consider going low carb. There are so many great podcasts like Vinnie Tortorich. His nutritional program is called No Sugar, No Grains. It's basically low carb. There is the Low Carb MD podcast. They're wonderful. Check out all these podcasts. Go online. You can find books on low carb. Definitely consider trying it if you're struggling with low fat and you're willing to eat animal protein. And I do recommend that. And I have a lot of friends, wonderful friends who are vegetarians, and this is in no way a criticism of them. It works for them, just like Weight Watchers works for some other people in my life, and that's great. I'm just telling you guys what worked for me and inviting you to research and give it a try. I'm the kind of person, if it can't hurt me and it might help, I try it. So, hey, even back in the day, I tried vegetarianism, discovered it wasn't for me. When I discovered Dr. Atkins, there was no going back. And then I found that I had Hashimoto's, and once I got that under control, and got on the right thyroid replacement, the eating low carb worked again for me. Now I flex. So I flex in and out. And it's a lot easier now because I listen to these podcasts and they kind of reinforce the message and they keep me on track. So be grateful that the internet has advanced the way it has now and that there are so many legitimate voices out there. But if you're a patient, I know that insurance premiums are expensive and you want to be able to use your copay and find a doctor that's going to help you. But in my experience, they just don't know how to handle chronic conditions. And that's what I'm talking about here. Chronic conditions like PCOS, Hashimoto's, and other autoimmune conditions. Consider investing in yourself, but you want to do your homework first and find the right functional medicine practitioner. And then when you do find the right one, then do what they recommend. Make those lifestyle changes, make the nutrition changes, and watch your life change for the better. I hope everyone enjoyed this solo episode. I hope to have some more guests on for you soon. And I would be so honored if you would go on Amazon and purchase my book, My Escape from the Sick Care System, in paperback or Kindle. If you like it, leave a review. Even if you don't like it, leave a review, but a thoughtful review. Thoughtful criticism, constructive criticism is always welcome. I have 2 more books coming out in this trilogy. The second one is going to go into more detail about my uninsured hospital stay in 2018, and then my reaction to the events of 2020. Because by the time 2020 rolled around, I was fully awake and questioning things, and I certainly questioned the narrative back then. All right, everyone, thank you all for listening. Be well, and I'll see you in the next episode.